Hello, Agents of Change. This is Justine Bromwell with another episode of Legal Advice in Paradise. And today I have one of Hawaii's top family law attorneys,
Wow,
Bradley A. Coates.
that'd be me.
Yeah. How many years of practice?
Oof. I think this is 36. I've
36.
been running the Coates and Frey firm and its predecessor, the law office of Brad Coates, and its predecessor before that, Rolfing Smith and Coates. So I've been doing this for quite a while. And,
You've been around. You've seen everything.
I've seen literally tens of thousands of divorce cases. This firm we've got 10 attorneys in the firm, and we've probably handled over 20,000 divorces over the last 35 years. So a lot,
Yeah.
quite a bit.
And listeners, I'm going to let you in on something. Bradley Coates was my attorney when I was 24 years old. Unfortunately, I have been married 3 times, and he took care of the first one.
24 years old. Seems like only yesterday, Justine.
Yeah. But anyway, we're going to cover divorce and what it entails, how it affects the family, the statistics of divorce, and what to expect when sitting down with an attorney such as Brad. And so I'm going to let Brad take over right now and give us a little bit about the background and national statistics.
Well, a lot of people get divorced. Everybody talks about that statistic about there being half of all marriages ending in divorce, and it's actually the breakdown is about 45% of first marriages end in divorce, 65% of second marriages end in divorce, and fully 85% of third marriages end in divorce. So
yeah, unfortunately, I would fall into that
you'd
category.
be high risk.
And not proud of that, but I know I discussed this with you earlier when I asked you to be on the show. You know, exactly how many people do you see in this revolving door of more than 1 or 2 marriages?
Lots of people are on their second marriages.
Mm.
The biggest problem with second marriages is trying to integrate kids from the first marriages.
Exactly.
You know, the Brady Bunch style. They work well on TV, but it's oftentimes a deal breaker for actual family mechanics. So that becomes a problem. Second marriages that have got stepkids are like twice as likely to divorce as second marriages without. So.
And then of course key causes to this.
Well, that could be any number of things. The ones that I talk about when I speak on divorce are oftentimes the same ones that you see in the sort of on the daytime soap operas. You got, it's money, sex, and family. Money can be too much or too little. During this last Great Recession, money turned into that was the single biggest issue for marriage in the last few years. Since 2007. Sex, again, too much or too little, maybe not enough inside, too much outside of the marriage, whatever happens there. And family can be anything from different viewpoints on raising kids to meddling in-laws. There's, all kinds of issues that can arise with family.
And, people don't realize, and I know this is going to be part of what you're going to talk to us about, but you mentioned finances and how it stresses the marriage and the family. However, people don't realize that when you get divorced, what happens with the finances then? It's even worse.
Well, what happens then usually is that it decimates the finances. I mean, you don't want to go around chopping everything you own in half, all the time. The standard of living, it's been traceable that the standard of living for men rises oftentimes after divorce, whereas that for women it's much more difficult. Women oftentimes wind up that matronly thing where they sort of wind up taking care of the kids, and it doesn't happen all the time nowadays. Joint custody is quite common, but a lot of times women who have not maybe advanced as far in their career and whatever, alimony in Hawaii at least, alimony is very rare. Less than 9% of all cases in Hawaii have alimony.
Wow.
So it's a real shocker for the Wahinis a lot of the time.
Right. That's too bad. And let's go into the difference between contested and uncontested, because there's a huge difference between the two. And let's educate the listening public for those who don't understand what the difference is.
That's probably the single biggest issue that you've got to try and scope out when you're getting divorced, is whether or not you can possibly make it uncontested, which is essentially the parties themselves reaching an agreement, signing off on a divorce decree, and just processing it almost ministerially through the family court, versus the party's inability to reach an agreement. And then you got the attorneys in it, and then you got the judge in it, and the whole court system, and it goes up exponentially. Just to give you a little bit of a overview, an uncontested divorce, Coates and Frey, we charge $500 retainer for an uncontested divorce, and it can be done in, 3 months, 2 months, 3 months, maybe 4 months. The court slows down a little bit sometimes if there's kids involved, because you have to go through that kids first program.
Right, and we're going to cover that later.
But it is very fast and very cheap and very friendly, and makes for a good ongoing relationship within the family. There's a lot to be said for that. The problem, of course, when you've got a contested divorce, is that you don't have any of that. You've got to hire lawyers, and they're expensive. And then once lawyers are hired, you can only communicate through the lawyers. You can't even try and communicate oftentimes between the parties themselves.
Now you have 2 attorneys.
Yeah.
And also now take us where somebody hasn't had a divorce, and we don't want that to happen, but say someone calls you, hey Brad, I want to sit with you. As soon as they sit in your chair, what would you like them to have prepared? Or in most cases they probably sit down and they're very emotional, and they're probably going on a tangent, and what would be preferably to like arm them with information of if they come and consult with you?
Well, the main, obviously the more financial information they can bring, the better.
Okay.
And of course, if you want to be anything remotely resembling an empathetic divorce lawyer, you've got to listen to them, vent to some degree. But you're really not paid to be lawyers. Are just too expensive to use them as therapists.
Oh, that's a good point, listening audience. It's expensive.
It is expensive. Most lawyers in the range of $250 to $350 an hour. So you don't want to spend a lot of time just chatting.
Okay.
The things that probably the most useful things to know about are house valuations.
Okay.
Knowing the current value of your real property, knowing what the mortgage is, so that you can deduct that out and figure out what the net equity is, and then somebody tries to buy somebody out, or else you can sell it on the open market or whatever you're going to do. But house valuations, pension valuations are a lot of times something that people forget. Here in Hawaii, pensions are totally divisible, which means that half of my IRA, half of my company pension, anything I've been earning during my life, half of that's going to be allocable to my wife.
May I ask you a question now? The whole half thing, what is that called now in Hawaii?
Well, it's called for pensions, it's called the Linson formula. It's just a case that divides up pensions, and they are divisible based upon half of the number of years that you were married and currently employed in that same job. You may be referring to the half thing, which is community property. Community property in California. In Hawaii, we don't have community property. We have what's called equitable distribution, which basically starts at half as well. So they're very similar.
Okay.
In California, it's a mandatory half decision, whereas in Hawaii, under equitable distribution, the judge can theoretically, they don't do it very often, but they can theoretically swing away from a half distribution. If the rich doctor's getting divorced from the nurse, they can give her 55 or 60% of the house proceeds instead of 50-50.
I see.
But then the trade-off is that we go lighter on alimony usually.
Oh, okay.
So California has very, very strict alimony provisions, but you only get maximum of half of the property. We can give you more than half of the property if you're the lower earning spouse, but you then are going to have you're probably going to have less alimony.
So in essence, when someone comes to sit with you for the first time, they should have all their finances together.
Well, as much as possible, but any good divorce lawyer is going to have the court form. You can go online and get the court forms and do those in advance if you really want to be an accelerated. A good student of the good client.
Yeah, because I didn't know that. And how can they get that now?
Well, there's websites, Hoiki on the So you can pull up the paper. There's 2 sets of financials. There's an income and expense, which is a monthly income statement that tells how much you're making and expending monthly, mainly for use in child support and alimony cases. And then there's an asset and debt statement, which is the overall sort of macro finances that you've got.
Okay.
And that's like the overall balance sheet, and that's where the property division comes in.
Okay. So these are the things that you would help in getting prepared for all of this.
That definitely helps, yeah.
Okay.
But it's also true that sometimes you just need to move ahead. I mean, one of the problems that you have with divorce, being a divorce lawyer and trying to move intelligently for clients is clients are stuck. They don't. It's a very difficult decision to make, and so there's a lot of hemming and hawing. A lot of people that talk about, well, can we just do a separation instead of a divorce? There's a lot of that kind of back and forth, and the problem with that can be that if you hesitate for too long and the other side starts to fire away, then you can next thing you can be in the middle of a contested divorce. Whereas sometimes it's smartest to try and make an uncontested settlement proposal and an overture to try and settle the whole damn thing early on. So you want to you don't want to wait too long moving forward with the case.
Right, and that was another thing. Grounds in Hawaii, it's a no fault?
It's all no fault. Most of the whole country is no fault nowadays.
Okay.
But the grounds are these whatever the legislature creates. In Hawaii, it's the marriage is irretrievably broken, whatever the heck that means. In California, it's irreconcilable differences, whatever the heck that means. So there are all these kind of pithy sounding grounds, and basically it means that if one party wants out, they get out. You cannot block somebody from divorcing you. You can slow it down, you can make it cost more, but you can't stop somebody from divorcing. If one side wants a divorce, they get a divorce.
Well, that brings up the question then. I know I read when you were talking about your book, typically it's one person who wants the divorce. What happens to the one that doesn't want the divorce?
They swallow hard and get divorced anyway.
What do they do? I mean, do they hire their own attorney because you cannot fight against it. It's not like a civil litigation, right? It's totally different.
Well, say you're a good Catholic girl, and which I think the last time I checked you are, and you just don't believe in divorce. You can try and make a motion for reconciliation. I've been doing this for 35 years. I think I've seen that happened twice, and neither time was it successful. You basically, if one side wants to get divorced, they get divorced. You're better just swallowing hard and realizing that's what's going to happen. You can slow it down. You can refuse to cooperate. You can, but I mean, at some point, even if it's by default, you wind up getting divorced regardless.
Yeah. How long have you seen something like this drag out because of that?
Well, it depends because it kicks. I started to tell you the difference between uncontested and contested divorces. Uncontested, maybe 2, 3, maybe 4 months. Very friendly, good for the kids, very cheap. I have $500 retainer. The total cost is maybe $1,000, $1,500, $2,000. Versus a contested divorce, the retainer is $5,000, and the total fees go to 10, 20, 30, 50. God only knows how many thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
And the timeline stretches out accordingly.
Yeah.
Because then you're stuck in the court system, and it's not real. They do the best they can to move lots of cases through the courts in Hawaii, but it's slow and unwieldy. And I've seen cases drag out for a couple of years that way.
Yeah, I was just wondering. Yeah, that's a long time.
Well, it's a long time to be in emotional limbo. That's for sure.
And also residency. How does that come into play here?
Well, anybody can get divorced in whatever state they are a resident of, but you can't just fly in, thinking that you're on Hawaii for a vacation, and then while you're at it, well, maybe I'll get divorced. You have to actually be a Hawaii resident for 6 months, and that's similar residency requirements apply in most other jurisdictions. Some shorten it up a little bit, some lengthen it out a little bit. Some, you can only have a sort of interlocutory decree, and then they won't process a final decree until several months later. But most everywhere, you're looking at a residency of about 6 months. The problem, of course, is if you have a separation where one party leaves Hawaii, goes back to the mainland, whatever, and is there for more than 6 months, then then the person who's remaining can file legitimately in Hawaii, and the person who's moved to Minnesota can file there if they've been there 6 months. So then you get into a conflict of laws situation. Then you get lawyers in both jurisdictions, which is really a mess. It's great for the lawyers, but not so great for the clients.
Okay.
So sometimes, when we were talking earlier about, what all should a client assemble before they come into the office, sometimes tripping over, how much do I need, I'm not quite ready yet, either emotionally or I haven't got the paperwork ready. And sometimes you got to come in and get the advice early on because there is a difference between who files first. I mean, it's literally seizing the high ground from where the case follows. I mean, if my wife, wises up, decides to divorce me and move, and start something in Minnesota, and I've got to fly back and forth to Minneapolis, St. Paul every time there's a court hearing, I'm not going to be very excited about that, and I'm going to probably cave in on the negotiations at some point. Whereas if I'm still here and she's gone, then then she's got the disadvantage. It's almost like the home court advantage in a sporting event.
Oh my!
Although that's a bad analogy.
Yeah, well. Yeah, and okay, so we're gonna move on into temporary orders, which would mean.
Well, there is the court makes a decision on all issues in a divorce case ultimately, and that's what goes into a divorce decree and a final court hearing. But there are some issues that are viewed as being so urgent that they can't wait for the final hearing, which could be a year away for the whole divorce to be granted. So sometimes initial things like temporary custody, temporary child support, temporary occupancy of a marital residence,